episode 153 of Jung at Harp. Today, we are going to talk about what is in your Imaginal disc kit. Now, this is a little subject that we're taking from butterflies and caterpillars. I am Deborah Henson-Conant, and I'm here with Kathleen Wiley. I'm a composer and a performer, and Kathleen is a Jungian psychoanalyst, and we both play the harp, although Kathleen's is not in appearance today. So because of this, we call these sessions Jung at Harp. And every week we get together with a question. We come up with a question that we are curious about exploring, and we have a conversation about that. We don't come with answers, we come with questions. And the conversation opens that up with you. So depending on where you're watching this, you should be able to comment, and those comments come to us and become part of the conversation. So Kathleen, I got all excited about imaginal discs when I started looking at metamorphosis and getting a little deeper into it. And we talked about this a little bit last week when I discovered that caterpillars, when they turn into butterflies, it doesn't just happen. We know that, but a couple things that are really important happen. And first they build this encasement, a safe place, and then they turn to goo, and then they metamorphosize. And I was like, well, how does that happen? And when they're goo, what are they? Am I a butterfly or am I a caterpillar at that point? So I went researching about this, and I discovered that there's something called imaginal discs and imaginal cells. And the imaginal discs are something that the caterpillar has this from the very beginning. And this is all insects who metamorphosize, and possibly all insects have this. I'm learning more. And it's kind of like a kit. Hello, here's my kit for becoming a butterfly. And so there's a sac, and it has all these sort of different things. And when we go to metamorphosize or mature, this is our mature self. Hello, my mature self. To this and this. But we as humans often inhibit that transformation into our mature self. And so I'm really interested in exploring with you a bunch of things, but in particular, what is like that, caterpillars come with this sort of like, and you will become a butterfly, and you will have legs like this, and you will have and then you have the sac to that. And in many ways, you just have to allow yourself to go to goo, and that's going to happen if you're a caterpillar. As humans, my sense is that we aren't all going to turn into a specific kind of butterfly. We may have something each very different, a different sac, and that we have that little, our picnic basket of who we are as we mature it's there, but it's very different. And I have a feeling you can speak to that.
Yeah, I want to say that I recently, like within the last month, have been in a butterfly house, which is a very interesting experience. And to just be in a space where there were, hundreds of butterflies flitting around and watching. So I'm curious as to whether or not butterflies are like humans and that there is a generic sac, but then each sac has some specificity that's unique to that butterfly, because that's the way it is for humans. Jung says that we can have a generic manual for our psyche, but that every psyche needs its own individual manual because it's slightly different. Just like our skeleton, we may have the same basic skeleton, but yet our skeletons are different and they're fleshed out differently, and we all look differently. And, we all have hands and we all have fingerprints, but our fingerprints are unique to us. And there's the voice print that's unique to us. Science is now showing us. So anyway, that's part of what in Jungian analysis, we are creating space to follow and listen for what is that unique aspect of the imaginal disc sac that is one's own true self, that is one's innate self. With the butterfly, it's a little bit different because, although I suppose if there's a butterfly expert watching, you might clear me up on this if I'm wrong, that I imagine that it is also specific to the environment, that there are some butterflies that probably thrive in some environments and some that don't thrive in others, I'm guessing. So it's kind of like human beings. We come in with our own energy system, and sometimes we're in an environment where we thrive, and sometimes we're in an environment where we don't. And part of what happens and how that disc sack unfolds and takes shape is dependent on the interplay with the environment.
Well, I actually want to go back to something. Yes, I'd love that. And I'm thinking about something you said earlier before we came on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking when we talked about this in the context of the power of pattern, because I'm just about to be, that's what I'm thinking about in the next quarter
Mm-hmm.
of the academy. We're looking at the power of pattern, and I'm thinking that you took on to play a 30-minute set with your husband of music.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been practicing that music, you've been creating the structure,
Mm-hmm.
just like a butterfly is creating that structure of being a butterfly from the sack. But then you had an interesting experience because you went and you played it and you recorded it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were recording it, you felt like, oh, I'm making all these mistakes. And, all this stuff was happening. All these things were firing in your head. And then you went back and looked at it. And when you went back and looked at it, you said, yeah, I saw all those mistakes and they didn't matter. And the music was there.
Yeah.
And you didn't say it like, and the music was there. You just said, but the music was there. And I was like, yes, that. So what I'm hearing is that, as we become, when all these things were given the structure of a piece of music or a structure of, an improv form or a structure of what we're doing in our lives, but it is how we are being within that, then the music is there in how we are being. And I just realized how this fits together. You and I were talking about how, um, if we're thinking about what we're doing to a really high level, that's how we're being. If you practice this music so that even though you're making mistakes, there's a structure there that you can follow. There are patterns that you can follow. So the music of who you are is going to come out in that.
Right. Part of it, yes, a part of my experience is in watching myself was that what mattered most did was in the forefront. But I had obviously enough fluency, enough technical skill that what mattered most could come to the forefront. It's kind of that it's a I'm thinking about patterns now, and you're teaching
Right.
patterns in the
Yeah.
academy. And that when we have the structures, we have the patterns, and we have worked to be in relationship to those patterns,
Mm-hmm.
then we can kind of forget about the patterns because they begin to operate on our behalf.
Right. They begin to,
And
yeah.
yeah, and this
Mm-hmm.
is really true about how our psyche and our personalities
Mm-hmm.
get formed, is that, patterns develop and then they just are there and we're acting from them without even realizing it. And sometimes that's a positive, life-giving thing, and sometimes that can
Mm-hmm.
be a very negative, limiting pattern. But they take on the pattern becomes, oh gosh, what is it? It's like this isn't the right way to say it, I don't think, but it becomes something that holds us, that
Well,
we can then drop into what's underneath the pattern.
yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about how the structure of the butterfly allows that creature, whatever it is, to sink in, and here it is, and then you get to go do what you do as a butterfly. But it reminded me of, I'm teaching the blues this quarter, and the blues is a simple form. It's a 12-bar blues. We're all sort of familiar with that form, but for many of the people who are coming from classical music that I work with on the harp, it is a complex form and they have to worry about it and think about it. And so I was very excited to discover a new structure that's so
Mm-hmm.
simple. I mean, it's basically, I don't know if I can't always tell how the sound comes out of the instrument, but it's basically this bass line. It's a descending bass line. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a bass line that I use a lot. It happens in a lot of, like, even in, like, that's the bass line within a more, flamenco type feel. But the bass line, when you allow it to have the feel of the blues, then
Mm-hmm.
it gives you a structure in which to then start feeling and being the expression.
Right, right, right. But that's the key, isn't it? Feeling and being the expression,
Right.
which the imaginal disc kit for the butterfly allows them to do.
Right. It's already given to them. Here's
It's
your
given to them.
there's
Yeah.
they get this blues form at the beginning, like, here it is, and you got the whole thing.
Yeah. And
Uh,
you just are it. And so as creatives and
Mm.
as human beings who want to live fully, we, what we're all trying to do, and I do as a
Mhm.
psychoanalyst, and I do with
Mhm.
my music and other, is I'm looking to how can I actually let that imaginal disc kit, what's there, come together in the most beautiful form that it was designed for, you know?
Yeah, because, and I was, as you were saying that, I was thinking that, so first of all, one of the things that makes it work is when you get to the point that you're not thinking about it. This is what my students are always saying when
Hmm.
they have this revelation of, like, oh, I love this thing. I love this pattern because I don't have to think.
Right.
And I think what happens to us, because we were talking about this, like, what patterns constrain us and
Right.
what patterns release us and allow us to transform within. So
Hmm.
we're looking for patterns that allow us to transform within them. And yet we are given socially as kids, all these patterns that are constantly constraining us with the intention of protecting us. And
Hmm.
ultimately then, I mean, we all know that's nothing new, but actually being able to get inside that mechanism, dismantle it, let that go to goo so we can create this new pattern of self-expression.
Yeah.
That's what, and I know that for you and me in our teaching capacities, we're both doing that,
Right.
working to help people get patterns that will allow them to embody
Right.
their own transformation.
Right. Right. Yeah, because the heart of transforming into you or me or
Mhm.
whoever, to if you're listening, the heart of transforming into being who you are is listening to who you are, is beginning to pay attention inside. And for
Uh-huh.
me, when I can sit at the harp and play with the mind of what is this tune to me, where am I in this tune, where is this tune in me, where does it speak to me, and I can allow that to be forefront in my mind. I can allow that to be the felt sense that I'm focusing on, instead of focusing on, am I going to land on those strings properly, or blah blah blah. That makes all the difference. And so it, our mind, our thinking needs something to do. We just have to point it in the right direction, in a direction that will aid us.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that I keep coming back to hearing you say, my sense when I was doing it as I was making mistakes, and then when
Yeah.
I listened to it back, I heard the music, and I keep thinking that I'm noticing that sometimes people who are coming from classical music, and they're coming from the idea that there's a structure already here that I have to fit in, and
Hmm.
it's complex. Um, it is very difficult for them to just do the same thing over and over
Hmm.
and let this pattern get to you. Like, if you're constantly trying to control it, then the transformation doesn't ever happen. And then you start reinforcing the pattern of, like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Oh, I did the wrong thing. And this is what I'm excited about this quarter in what I'm teaching, is finding ways, and for each person there needs to be something there that will interest them. So for example, some people, this is not enough. for me, I'm getting more and more comfortable with that because I'm like, oh my God, I could go on with that forever and ever and ever. I'm just here and I'm just playing. What did I have for breakfast? Well, let me tell you that. Like that can be really fun for me, but maybe not for everyone. But what is the thing that lets them sink in? Is it a beautiful harmony? Is that what it is? What is it that will allow them to repeat? Because a pattern is not going to be delicious. It can't work on you until it repeats.
Right. That's right.
Oh, but now I'm thinking of this other thing that I just heard. This guy was talking to me about. There's some kind of pattern that doesn't repeat. Anyway, go on. Back to you, Kathleen.
I just was marveling at how integrated the harpist in you is with who you are, just how easily you go back and forth to the harp and just put yourself right there in oneness with what you want to express with it. It's really beautiful. So I just want to say that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's break that apart for a minute.
Okay.
Like what is that and why is that? So there's two personas. I've got two personas. One is the composer. Well, three. There's as a teacher, but the composer, which is very different from the harpist. It was very difficult for me to shift and become a harpist, especially because the harp has limited chromatic capabilities. It's not true. It's just different. And I write in a much more harmonically complex style as a composer. So intellectually, there was this me that, and if you watch The Golden Cage, you'll see that me. It was hard for me to accept the beauty of the repetition of that and what it allows me to express as a human in the moment. So that was, it was like, what's here for all time? Is this brilliant enough? No, it's not. It's just me expressing myself, so learning the value of that. And I have it that you could do the same if you had a go-to, if there was something that you were like, this is my chord. I love this chord. This is my chord. I can always go there. I can play that over and over. It belongs to me.
Yeah, I think part of it, and you say it, and you mentioned it earlier off camera, is that when you were 11 and you heard Debussy's La Mer, you were there. You knew you were a musician. You knew you were a composer. I mean, you knew that was your life's work. And what I would say is that outer world experience of hearing that resonated. It like woke something up inside of you.
You said something a minute ago. You said listening to who you are.
Listening to who you are. Yeah. Yeah. Listening to who you are. And, Jung, as well as some others, say that if we go back to what we could do when we were a child for hours on end by ourselves, then often there is the seed of our life's work in it, because it was us, we were being with us and what was ours to bring into the world.
Right. And I think I just heard a friend talking about this morning, that at that moment, he was told he was too much, he was too loud. And that then started this other pattern of the fear that who I am expressing myself to be when I'm feeling me is wrong.
Yeah. 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 And that, I think many people get that. Probably all of us get it to some degree, but there are people who get it in monstrous proportions. And it's so destructive because it sets in motion a sense of shame and guilt for being and expressing who one is. So, when we ask the question, what's in your imaginal disc kit? I don't, in our imaginal disc kit, we have to be able to put or relate to feelings like shame and guilt and put them in proper perspective. Because if the shame or the guilt is everything, then we will thwart we will both consciously but unconsciously thwart self-expression, and then, you know, we'll adapt, and we may be very successful in however we adapt in the outer world, but the inner world and the body mind will suffer greatly.
You know, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, and I encourage others to, you know, if you're having thoughts on this, if you resonate with this, and if you're in a place where you can share, please do, because we love to hear what you have to say. I keep thinking of these imaginal sacs, these imaginal discs, as okay, I just got to this planet, and well, here's my lunch sack. What did I get? You know, and this is what's in the lunch sack, and this is who I am. And how do I know? It's because that's what I resonate to, little by little. And the only control I have over it is to hate it or to love it. I mean, and if I hate it, I think I can control it.
Well, and what I want to say is we really have
Mhm.
no control over it, but what we can do
Right.
is relate to it in ways that will aid forward movement and being who we are,
Mhm.
or that are going to thwart our movement.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's the choice we have with ego,
Right. So
you
we
know?
can't control
Right,
who we are. We
right,
think we can control it by these negative feelings. I'm
right.
going to share this, and we may not be able to see the
Yeah.
whole thing. So Victoria says, when you are in the moment, you only have a second to express what is in your mind right now. But when you compose, you have the time and opportunity to go back and refine what you want to express. Do you think that time aspect, immediate versus having more time, changes how I interact with the music? It certainly changes how I interact with the music. You know, when I'm improvising, I have structures and I have patterns, and by and large, I start with a pattern, and that's what I teach when I'm teaching the power of pattern. Is that little bit of stuff that I can start with and enjoy, that lets me ride on it. When I'm composing, I am usually composing within a storyline, and I'm composing what the people are saying or what they're thinking or what they're experiencing. And so I'm trying to get that, and I'm trying to get it emotionally. And I know that there have been times in my life when it has taken me years to complete a piece because I couldn't find one part that was expressive or something like that. And so it's just a really, really different process. And it was surprising to me because the composing was so cerebral and also emotional. You know, it was surprising to me when I first started learning the blues, that it could be so simple, that it was all about the moment. It was all about self-expression. And when you wrote, when you were in the moment, you only have a second to express what's in your mind right now. I heard that as, when you come to life, you have only a moment to be
Mhm.
alive. That's it. Only a moment to express yourself. And are you going to be freely who you are, or are you going to be constrained your whole life? And my struggle is, is this struggle to stop struggling. So
I'm laughing, but it's not funny. I mean, I think we all,
right.
I know what you mean. Yeah, but the key word I want to say in here is being present. The key word in your is being present in the present moment. And when we're in the present moment, then there's something magical that happens. And that when there's time, or when we go to the past or we go to the future, it changes the experience and thus the expression in the present moment.
Yeah, and I love how you said being in what I wrote down, being in the present, being in the presence of music, being
Right.
in the presence of who you are. And I find that learning improvisational patterns do not constrain us at all. You and I have talked about that
Mm-hmm.
so many times, that there's a container that opens us up.
Right.
And this is what I am looking forward to teaching and exploring and discovering as we go into the power of pattern, which is this
Mm-hmm.
next quarter. And what I'm getting from this conversation is that these patterns allow us to be in the presence of
Yes.
ourselves and in the presence of music itself, rather than thinking, is this good enough? Is this not good enough? But actually be in that present.
Yes. Yes.
Wow. And so it almost becomes like a practice of being present, practice of presence.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being a practice of presence in the present moment.
Right. So the power of pattern that we choose, the power of creative patterns
Right.
is the power of presence, of choosing presence.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when we take on these patterns is that if we're comfortable enough, they may go off into flights of fantasy, and then you come back to them. They provide the structure that allows us to then fly and then come
Mm-hmm.
back and fly and come back. And it doesn't mean that we can't compose something, because I'm constantly composing things, but not when I am improvising.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
is the moment of flight and of freedom.
Right.
And it is such a beauty. And it's that moment when, like you said, there was music there.
Yeah. There is music. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And to me, that defines what there is in this realm of life. There is music there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And the music of our own psyche soul, when we quit trying to be who we think we should be or who someone else wants us to be, or whatever standard we put out there or the world's put out there for us to follow, and we just be who we are. There's something about the music of our own nature that it just changes everything in our life. And I think bringing that to the harp, bringing the presence of what matters to me, who I am, what I feel, what I experience, bringing that to the plane changes my relationship to it. It changes my own
Right.
experience.
And I'm thinking that's true of anything we do. If it's
Absolutely.
cooking, if it's harp, when we
Yeah.
bring ourselves to that presence. And the other thing that I'm hearing is that there are patterns that when we interrupt the patterns that have been interrupting who we are,
Mm-hmm.
and then we take on something simple that allows us to then become present to who we are, then we start to actually get those parts that
Yeah.
are us. And if we were a butterfly, the parts that we would be getting, or if we were a caterpillar, the parts that we would be getting are the parts that allow us to fly. And I
Mm-hmm.
have it that is what we can take on, and we can choose to do that. And I have that when meditating, playing music allows us to go to the goo that then lets us emerge as the music that we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll pull up this last comment. I know, it's
We're gonna
time
have to
for us
stop.
to, yeah, okay. Oh, Victoria says, when I look at a moment in my life, how I see myself at the time versus how I see myself in hindsight can be very different.
Yeah.
My hindsight informs how I see my future
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that we also can allow ourselves to be in a moment of grace where all of that is fluid,
Right.
where we become that goo out of which something we never even imagined
Mm-hmm.
can emerge.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today in Jung at Harp. And Victoria, thank you for your comments and all the comments that we get afterwards. It is such a joy to have these conversations. Kathleen, thank you so much for coming with this just like open mind to explore. It's a joy of my life to be able to have these conversations with you, and that we get to share them with everyone else is just wonderful. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. And Kathleen, will we see each other next week?
We'll see each other next week.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you again. And thank you.